I'd like to give, first of all, my profound appreciation to the ACT Alliance, Caritas, Internationalis, and all the other co-organizers for this event, and to thank you personally for elevating me with His Eminence, which only belongs to people like this.
No, you're eminent too.
It's
on the list.
So thank you very much. I'd like to give a particularly special recognition to my dear friend and colleague, His Excellency Archbishop Ivan Jurkovic, the Ambassador for the Holy See, who has done miracles here, especially last Thursday during the Papal Mass, for which we are deeply grateful. My name is Evan Garcia, as was indicated who I am, but I am also a Filipino. And as a Filipino, I have family members who are migrants on 3 continents. So when we talk of this subject, it's not merely academic. I have lived and seen what migration is. As a Filipino, I'm also the representative of my government. And for my government, the Republic of the Philippines, migration has for decades been a priority of our foreign policy. The reason is very, very simple. Almost 1 in 10 Filipinos is outside of the country as a migrant, as a worker, documented or undocumented, contributing to both the development of their host countries and the development of their mother countries. This is something every Filipino knows by heart, by upbringing, because so many of us have a migrant, a classmate, a fratmate, a neighbor, a colleague who went abroad to seek better opportunities for themselves and their families. How has this translated into the way the Philippines has acted in the area of migration diplomacy? We have 3 levels. First, we have invested enormous amounts of government resources in preparing our people who desire to go abroad to work and ensuring that they have safety where they are, access to us, and finally, that when they return home, they will be given a chance to reintegrate into the societies they left behind so long ago. The Philippines has been recognized throughout the world for having an excellent migration system for the entire migration cycle. Secondly, we have endeavored to the maximum extent possible to conclude bilateral agreements with countries that have been generous enough to open their doors to our people. In terms of conditions of entry, conditions of work, we are in almost constant discussion with foreign governments. Every day, somewhere in the world, a Philippine diplomat or labor official is talking with his opposite counterpart somewhere. And lastly, and most importantly for the purposes of this meeting, we have been taking an active role together with so many others, states and non-state actors, in this huge attempt to forge a better way of governance for migrants. We have done this in the context of the UN, in the context of the IOM, in the context of the GFMD, and now, most recently, in the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, which was kicked off by these famous 2016 UN General Assembly resolutions that have been previously mentioned. We are at one with many others and with all of you in the principles we seek to have protected, promoted, and to the maximum extent possible institutionalized as a matter of international practice and national policy. And these, of course, include the recognition, we hope, that children in detention is not acceptable in the modern world. We also wish to lessen unnecessary and artificial distinctions between regular workers and non-regular workers. We feel, as was pointed out earlier, that denying a worker or workers access to social protection and legal protection and the other rights and services to which he or she should be entitled under international law and national law does not in any way dampen irregular migration. It just, as I earlier said, exposes more people to dangers of trafficking, exploitation, and maltreatment. Another key aspect of our approach in the GCM is to focus, as has been said so many times, but I will say it again, on the human rights of the workers. If you do not focus on their human rights, the danger exists that many of the important dimensions of the migration experience or the encounter experience will be neglected, forgotten, swept under the rug. So our insistence on starting with the human rights of migrants is entirely rational and practical and pragmatic. It is in no way idealistic. It is the starting point for the logical and sensible discussion on how to move forward with global migration governance. Apart from, of course, ensuring that our people get decent work, a decent livelihood, and so on and so forth. But this is what governments are doing. And governments, including my own, I'll be honest, are very jealous of sovereignty. They will never cede sovereignty. So the GCM is, out of necessity and legally and rightly so, the GCM is a state-led process. But a state-led process that is not informed by the interests and concerns of all stakeholders will be politically tone deaf. It will not succeed if it does not include active interaction with the other parts of society. The Philippines has always welcomed interaction with FBOs, CSOs, NGOs in many aspects. Myself as a diplomat, I have worked with many of your organizations on other global issues which attained a huge degree of success, from climate change to environmental protection to the ban on cluster arms and the ban on personal landmines and the emergence of the the nuclear ban treaty, also on questions of human rights, IHL. We have worked very closely with you on international issues. Myself, from my personal experience, I can say how important it is that we have you with us in these discussions in order to multiply the message that we are trying to put out. We have also worked with you, very importantly, in the Philippines, because we have long been an advocate of interfaith dialogue. This is a very important part that maybe in this day and age we need to dynamize further. And finally, I want to leave you with a point, because it's very hard for me to compete with the previous speakers. You know, a priest, a refugee, and an artist. This is really difficult. So let me boil everything down to its barest bones. For decades, we've been hearing about the miracle of this thing called globalization. True, the freer exchange and flow of investments, trade, etc., etc. But migration, which was always a legitimate part of globalization, and way before that, because as was pointed out by the UNJ president himself, migration is as old as humankind. Migration was always a second thought, something that you didn't really have to talk about. But now, unfortunately, because of the so-called migrant and refugee crisis, there is increased public attention on it. So it is the time now to let all your voices be heard. And remember, as I said, this is a state-led process, but globalization, inclusion, and all these things don't happen in conference rooms. They happen out there somewhere. They happen on the shop floor. They happen in the schoolrooms. They happen in the community centers. They happen in your local groceries or local markets. Here is our front line. It's our front line because the reason, I humbly submit, that we are gathered here today, the reason we are gathered here today is because it is our responsibility to change the narrative. Despite all the scientific facts put forward that, in general, as was pointed out by the UN General Assembly President himself, migrants have paid more taxes than they ever got back in benefits. That migrants contribute to the health, well-being, and progress of all the societies they touch. Despite all the scientific data on this, there is still out there the notion that migration is somehow suspect or dangerous or, God forbid, an assault on Western civilization. We need to put this into proper perspective. And the only way this can be done is for those who make the rules to hear the voices of the people. And that is, among them, yourselves. We in the Philippines try not to be politically tone deaf. We try to listen, we try to work. We don't always agree. The Philippines is a functioning democracy. Everybody has an opinion. You know, you put 5 Filipinos in a room for an election and you will have 7 winners. That's how engaged we are. But getting back to this subject of migration, you must work to change the narrative. You must change the narrative, you must change minds, and above all, you must change hearts. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't usually talk about hearts, but since you're here, we must change hearts. And the best way to do this is through solidarity. Solidarity, like you have here, from all corners of the world, from all faiths, from all ideological persuasions. And so with that, I thank you for taking up so much of your time. There are so many other speakers. So thank you very much.